I'm big on marketing, and we have a system, that goes from lead gen to lead nurture to fulfillment to operations and sales. And we have all of that systems in place, but it doesn't make any sense unless you have a full belief system and you're doing it for a bigger cause. One of the things I have to say, Angela, my wife, does better than anybody else I've ever seen on the planet is that she builds a culture based on vulnerability and authenticity. So InBody, I will have to say, is probably one of the most critical pieces that I have ever used in 25 years of practice. And now I'm hooked on it. Now I kind of have an addiction to it because I like body metrics. When it comes to weight loss, and I'm a weight loss expert, I've seen thousands of patients. I've trained hundreds of doctors' offices on weight loss. And the number one thing I see is compliance from the patient seems to be the issue. My big thing is muscle to fat ratio. What I want to see, even before your blood work makes improvement, I want to see the muscle to fat ratio get smaller, especially now when we're dealing with GLP-1s, because sarcopenia is a real risk where we're starting to lose too much muscle and we're way out of range with the fat being too high. So we have protocols in place, and the InBody is the only objective piece that we can use. I mean, there are other bioimpedance scales out there, but if you're going to be doing clinical work, you want to have the gold standard, which is the InBody, to be able to measure those things.
Welcome to Beyond the Scale. I'm your host, Bradley Davey, and this podcast exists to educate and empower the next generation of healthcare providers. We want to share tips, tricks, tools, resources, and stories that are going to help catalyze your growth with InBody's ecosystem of health assessment tools, while expanding our conversations to include what it means to help build momentum, health, and longevity across a lifetime. Today, our guest has walked a path of personal health crisis to professional transformation. Dr. Brent Baldasare didn't just build a thriving practice, but he's built systems for others to also help grow their practices. In the face of rising GLP-1 trends and practitioners overwhelmed, we're here to offer some real clarity rooted in real results. Welcome to Beyond the Scale, Dr. Baldasare.
Thanks, Bradley. I'm more than excited to be here today.
Thanks for choosing to be here today. You've been in a lot of places. You've studied chiropractics, nutrition, human needs, and psychology. And I'd love to just hear more about where you've come from and how you got to where you're at today and what really makes you so passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'll give you the short version of my story. I was planning on being either a cosmetic surgeon or an orthopedic surgeon. I knew I wanted to do something in healthcare. When I'm getting paralyzed on the football field, my senior year in college, last game of the season, my right shoulder hit my left butt cheek. It's just not a natural position to be in. It took me almost 4 or 5 days to feel my legs again. But I was lucky. I didn't fracture anything. I didn't sever the spinal cord, just had massive swelling and damage to the disc. So that started me on the path. I got put into the medical ringer. I got put on that conveyor belt where, you see the ortho, then you see pain management, then you see that, your primary care, then you go to PT, and then, before you know it, I'm under 4 or 5 different doctors' care getting ready for surgery. In the process of the insurance getting me pre-qualified for the surgery, I started to get some second thoughts. About the 4th or 5th day, I started to get some feeling back in my legs. So there was just an internal voice inside that said, this is not the right path. Like this medical model, even though it was an emergency situation and I was all for the surgery out of the emergency, over the first week, I started to heal a little bit, even though the pain was excruciating. So long story short, I wound up not getting the surgery. It took me 2 years to recover and walk again, fully walk again. I was able to stand after a couple of months, but fully walk again. Never had the surgery. I've got multiple disc injuries. I've got cord compression. I've got stenosis. I've got arthritis, but I'm functional. So not to say I won't ever have the surgery, but it put me on a path at a young age to see that I had to be responsible for my health. Because if I laid it off on the doctors, I was on oxycodone and Oxycontin within 24 hours after the injury. I was on morphine, and there was really no end cycle for the pain I could be on pain medication my entire life if I wanted to, and I would have had a good excuse. So of all the things I learned in that whole experience was to going from being the victim to the survivor. And right now, most of us who are in healthcare right now, especially in this crazy times right now, is that most of our patients are stuck in victimhood. So the primary thing I think a lot of the healthcare providers who are moving the needle the most and getting the best results is coaching our clients to now become survivors. And just that little shift from having gone through that myself was probably maybe the most profound thing that has ever happened to me to be successful in practice, other than having empathy for patients and knowing what it's like to actually be a patient with no hope and not feeling like I'm ever going to, heal myself again. But going from victimhood to survivorship is probably the most powerful lesson I learned through that whole ordeal.
Yeah, there's really something beautiful to be said when you can go through a challenging experience and be able to see the positive that can come from it and change that perspective, and it really gives us more of a we can come from a place of empowerment. You know, some of my biggest challenges have also led to my biggest breakthroughs in life, and it's really fantastic that you're able to see that. That was when when you were in college,
Yeah, it was
you
my
said, or high?
yeah, it was my. No, I had some back injuries before, but nothing like that. It
Yeah.
was my senior year in college. Yeah, I played defensive end for Ursinus College.
So what were you studying in college at the time, and then how did that transition into decisions that you made into moving forward in your career?
Yeah.
You take that passion and work with it and mold it.
So I started at a double major pre-med biochem, and by the time I was done, I was human performance, a bachelor's in human performance, looking to go into med school. But doing a biochem double major and playing college football, I don't have the bandwidth for that. So I knew I was going to do something in healthcare. The injury really kind of shifted a lot of things for me. Like I was kind of an asshole, and like I was a captain of the football team. I kind of thought the world revolved around me. You know, one day I thought I was Superman, and then 24 hours later, I couldn't even feel from my waist down. I couldn't stand up. I thought I was a half a man. I just felt like I was never going to amount to anything. The entire world view of where I thought I was going to go was completely demolished overnight, and I could literally feel just my identity implode overnight, and almost just felt like I passed out from it. And then as I started to emerge from it, I started to see things in a different light. Like the world is maybe not exactly what I thought it was. Now, granted, I was 21, so I was an idiot anyway, being 21. But having gone through that, I realized I was either going to have to make a decision that I had to find a way to use my optimism to find a path for me, or just submit to being a victim and having an excuse outside of my control of why I never amounted to anything. So that's when chiropractic jumped on the table. And I got heavy into nutrition. I got heavy into anti-aging medicine. Peptides were very, very new back then, and chiropractic and physical therapy. And, I got into a lot of self-help things. I had done almost 10 years of coaching with Tony Robbins group. So mindset, movement, and putting the body in a position to heal is really the reason why I'm not paralyzed today. And the reason why it kind of gave me the empowerment to really feel like what happens when that internal drive surpasses whatever excuses you have why you can't do something. Like when that overwhelm happens and you feel like a small piece of a bigger thing, that really kind of woke me up. And I literally felt like my energy from, even though I couldn't stand up, I couldn't walk, I couldn't feel from my waist down, but I felt as powerful as I was at 245 pounds as an All-American defensive end, maybe even more powerful. So it was kind of an awakening moment for me. And I knew I had to get into something that was in healthcare that was going to change people's lives. So chiropractic was a great fit for the first 25 years of my career. Nutrition I got heavy into because it's impossible to heal the body without nutrition. And then I started getting into I'm an entrepreneur too. So, I've owned 26 companies. I've owned resort centers. I've owned bars. I've owned nightclubs. I've owned shopping centers. But really at the end of the day, all that was a way to fill my creative side. So now after 25 years, just about a year ago, we had sold all the clinics. We had sold all these other projects that I've built up that didn't align with helping people. It's taken about 25 years to get to that point, but just like being paralyzed, the more focused you are on the path you're going to go, the easier it is to shorten that distance.
And are you fully healed today from the injuries and everything that's come from it? Or is there anything that kind of resonates still?
Yeah, so I'm still significantly injured. And I have not gone the path of getting workman or disability. I would qualify for it, but I don't want to. I don't want to label myself as that. So like I'm in denial. I'm one of these people that completely believes in the placebo effect, even if you have to put it on yourself. Just 2 weeks ago, like today I went to the gym this morning. Powerhouse, maybe one of the strongest days I've had in months. But 2 weeks ago, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't even, just the fact of twisting to roll over to get out of bed was excruciating electrical pain down my legs and just paralyzing pain again. And so when that happens, used to be in the past, I would fall back into victim mode and I would, be dysfunctional for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But now I just recognize that's my litmus test. When that pain hits, when that dysfunction hits, when that fear hits, when that self-doubt hits, the second that pain shoots down my legs, all that happens, that's my litmus test to say, it's time to eat better. It's time to get into a movement pattern that's functional for you and that's a natural movement. It's time to not be the victim, now to be the Superman survivor. Like I kind of swing the pendulum as hard as I can the other way, and it seems to work for me. And after 35,000 patients, it seems to work for them too.
Is there something along the way that built this within you earlier on in your life that gave you the ability maybe to see that optimism? Were there people around you, or were there things that led you to think outside the box, maybe to go in this path or support like your psychology needs with, and your own development? Because it sounds like you've worked with it well over time and you've learned more. But was there something early on that just said, hey, it's okay for you to go that way and trust?
Listen, Bradley, I don't know if I've ever framed it that way before. Now, kind of, if I look back on it, I probably, I grew up with a single mom, 3 sisters. So I always knew I had to figure out how to forge my way through. I wasn't expecting to be paralyzed so young, but yeah, maybe the wiring from just a young age, knowing that it was going to be up to me on where I was going to end up, has just always been in my DNA. And I'm not alone, because I've seen, like I said, I've seen 35,000 patients, and I thought I was unique for a while. I always thought my story was more unique, but it's not. Matter of fact, I've met people who are in way bigger challenge than I've been in, and have completely done amazing things beyond probably things I'll ever accomplish. So, I think there's a kinship out there when people know that you've been hurt and vulnerable, and I think they recognize that. And I think it allows them to empower themselves to be something bigger than they thought they could be also.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think that's kind of where I was thinking, the ownership that you took early on and that was developed that led you into this process. And everybody doesn't have that. And your story is very unique to you and who you are. But you're right. When we reflect or we see mirror in other people, it gives us the freedom to start building our own momentum and growth and step outside of our own box.
No, 100%. I'm in agreement with that. I mean, it's interesting. I look back, now I'm in my 50s, and I thought the injury was going to be the most significant thing that happened in my life, and it really, it was in one area, but in other areas, it's not. I've been in. I'm an entrepreneur, so I've been in real estate development. I've done major projects before, and then they've failed, and we've gotten sued for, $30 million, and then I felt that same helpless feeling I had when I was paralyzed, I didn't have it in a physical sense. I had it in an emotional and creative sense when I went through that process also. So I feel like there's this, I think it's called the Fibonacci sequence, when this spiraling effect happens, where these circumstances in life keep showing up and manifesting in different ways. It's the same damn lesson. So maybe I haven't learned the lesson yet, because some of these things keep spiraling, but I keep pushing through them. But I will say that the outcome, after I go through some kind of devastating shitstorm, I will say the other side is usually always better. There's something bigger and better, and I've elevated my consciousness. I've elevated my understanding of myself. I've elevated my understanding of other people, and I just think that's maybe kind of what they call wisdom or growth. But, for crying out loud, I've learned enough lessons now, but, they're exciting, painful, but exciting.
And they're going to keep coming.
Yeah, they're going to keep coming. There's no way around that part of it.
No. Okay, so we're here, I think, more to let's pivot into more about your philosophy of care and how this has led to, how you treat patients and how you think about their path, and then how does body composition fit into that for you, and when did your journey start with InBody?
Yeah, so when we'd had our practice, it started as a 750 square foot practice with lawn furniture, and my wife was the front desk. And then it built 20 some odd years later. It was 6,000 square feet, 15 treatment rooms, 17 staff, a 1,200 studio media center on the second floor. So we blew it up, is what I'm saying. But it didn't blow up because I wanted a big center. It blew up because of the way that we built the culture within the practice. Like the practice was built on the regenerative wellness side, on my story of over-delivering to clients. Because one of the reasons why I was able to kind of get through my injury was the providers that I had in my circle. And we had some bad ones. When you get that kind of an injury, you kind of get shuffled around to some different therapies. But the providers that had a sense of heavy presence when they were with me during the therapy, that always stuck with me. Like, it wasn't just about the therapy or the peptide or the whatever technique they were using to get me to walk and feel my legs again. It was the provider that was present with me that made the biggest difference in the care. And that always stuck with me. So we built the practice, we built the culture around patients first. I know everybody says that, but a lot of them are just full of shit. It's not about patients. It's about the way they want patients to perceive them. That's not the culture. The culture is the feeling that patient gets by being in a room with you. So, it's not about how impressive I want somebody to think I am. At the end of one of those visits, whether it's a weight loss visit, an aesthetic visit, a regen med visit, is I want that patient to feel empowered to get to the goal that they want to get to. And then my job is to find out the root cause of what's keeping them from getting there. What are the self-discipline problems that they're having to keep them from getting there? What are the belief systems that they have in place that are keeping them from getting there? And that's the culture that we built in the practice. Just once we had the whole practice staff buy into that there, like that vision, it was just unstoppable. Like we couldn't stop the speed of the practice.
What were some things that you put into place to create barriers or buffers to be able to ensure that that would happen? Was it principles that you were training or you were teaching, or was it things on the wall? Or if I walked in and I was a patient and I experienced that, what would I see, feel, smell, taste, hear, kind of sensory stuff that might support that?
That's a great question. My wife would love that you answer that question because, my wife and I have been married now for over 30 years. So we've been together for 31 years, married for, we just had our 26th wedding anniversary. And we've worked together side by side ever since. So I don't think we've spent more than 2 days apart from each other in 31 years. So she knows how I'm thinking. I know what she's thinking. And we complement each other. She's got strengths where my weaknesses are, and I've got strengths where her weaknesses are. So my big thing with the office was for the providers. She's not a provider. She's a patient advocate. So my big thing is for the provider to, number one, before you do a service, you need to be fucking great at that service. Like, don't throw something in this office because you think it's going to make money. We don't put something in the office unless we believe 100% it's going to have a clinical outcome. If it's $50 or $25,000, it's not about the price, it's about the clinical outcome. That's number one on the clinical side. That was the culture that we built. And then as she started, kind of seeing where the experience in the office was, she wanted to really focus on the patient experience where I was focusing on the clinical experience. So with the patient experience was the second that somebody called on that phone, that person on the phone needs to convey to that person on the other line that this is an office like no other. Like, it wasn't just about what time was your appointment or what service is. Tell me about you. I want to hear, like, tell me everything you want to get. Like, we opened up the authority for that front desk person, even if it took an extra 5 or 10 minutes to be on the phone. Like, we want connection. Number one was connection built with the client on the highest level that they've ever seen. And we gave them authority, power, and training to be able to do that. And that was by far better than any marketing or advertising that we could have ever done. So she did it. And then by the time we were done in the office, we had a trademark color for the office that matched the website. And then we had a custom organic essential oil smell, depending on what room you were in. And we had a tea room in the back that had a different sense. And every TV had something to promote something about health or something that we did in the office, or a spotlight about a patient. And then as you walk down the hallway, the staff was empowered and trained. If you were a new face in the office, even if there was another client, just to take 1 second and introduce themselves to you. If you looked at our reviews, you would have thought that we had like 500 family members coming to our practice. But that's the culture that we built.
That's great.
And when we do coaching with clients right now, they're like, how did you guys get your office to be so big and grow so fast, even in the middle of recessions? Did you have some kind of a gimmick? Did you have some kind of a special offer? Did you undercut your competitors? No, we were actually a little bit more expensive than our competitors. We built the experience, and not just the experience on the clinical side, but also the experience on the patient side, which is probably maybe the most powerful thing you can do in your office.
Yeah, well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think I see a trend, and I'm so fortunate to work here at InBody and be able to go to all corners of healthcare to see where our tools are being used and hear all kinds of stories about what's happening and see trends. And one of the things that I sense is that there's more soul coming back into healthcare, and we're kind of moving away from maybe the shorter visits, or there's a lot of practitioners that are leaving mainstream medicine and major hospitals and starting their own clinics, or concierge medicine, direct primary care. There's a lot of clinics like you had showing up that are adding services that are complementary to other things that people want. And I just hear in your story that you really had a lot of soul there, and people were attracted to that. That's magnetic in marketing, and you don't have to have a big marketing budget to go out and show that you care about somebody to be able to improve their health and continue to have them come back and tell all their friends, and it'll grow like wildfire.
The marketing, I mean, I'm big on marketing, and we have a system, that goes from lead gen to lead nurture to fulfillment, operations, and sales. And we have all of that systems in place, but it doesn't make any sense unless you have a full belief system and you're doing it for a bigger cause. Like, one of the things I have to say, Angela, my wife, does better than anybody else I've ever seen on the planet is that she builds a culture based on vulnerability and authenticity. And if you don't have those two things, she will fire you on the spot in the moment she sees that you don't have the capacity to display those those two emotions. And it's just been powerful. Like our front desk is probably just as important as the case manager and the doctors in the office. And we want them to find empowering stories. Like when we have our staff meetings, we include the front desk person and the MAs as part of the success story. The doctors always get the credit. Dr. B did this and, I got these results, but that's not really the case. The front desk is the one that got them on the phone to get their confidence to walk in the front door. The case manager showed them enough value to be able to match the fees that we require to do one of our programs. And then the doctor is just the delivery system. So it's really the end game for me by the time I see them. It's really the whole staff working in unison as part of the treatment program. How I schedule you, how I talk to you on the phone, how I collect your money, that's all part of your treatment. Because that we're building out, everything stacks on top of each other, and that whole package is the experience.
Where does the InBody fit into that?
Yeah, so InBody, I will have to say, is probably one of the most critical pieces that I have ever used in 25 years of practice. And now I'm hooked on it. Now I kind of have an addiction to it because I like body metrics. When it comes to weight loss, and I'm a weight loss expert, I've seen thousands of patients, I've trained hundreds of doctors' offices on weight loss, and the number one thing I see is compliance from the patient seems to be the issue. Now, the InBody does a great job at that. We take probably a good 20 minutes on every new patient that comes in and explain to them what we're looking for in an InBody. My big thing is muscle to fat ratio. What I want to see, even before your blood work makes improvement, I want to see the muscle to fat ratio get smaller. I'm not as caught up in what the number is in the beginning. What I want to see is ratio-wise. I want to say, okay, so especially now when we're dealing with GLP-1s, because sarcopenia is a real risk where we're starting to lose too much muscle and we're way out of range with the fat being too high. So we have protocols in place, and the InBody is the only objective piece that we can use. I mean, there are other bioimpedance scales out there, but if you're going to be doing clinical work, you want to have the gold standard, which is the InBody, to be able to measure those things. So when I'm having a conversation with a patient, I'm going to let them know, I want your visceral fat at 10 or 9 or 10. I want to see your body fat ratio within these numbers. I want to see you have this much muscle mass. So I had that conversation before the InBody. So the next thing is we're about to do an InBody. Do you think their excitement level is high or low? Little trepidation maybe, but they're excited to know where they are. Because once I know where these numbers are, then I can build a roadmap and objectively show them how they're getting there. And in today's world with the GLP-1s, and we have a whole network now where we're training doctors on the new peptides that are coming out. We stay away from research peptides. We're really focused on just doing the ones that we can do through a 503A or B. We're LegitScript certified, so the attorneys have vetted the entire office on our process. So our standards are high. So the InBody fits in nicely with the standards that we've set. And with the peptide legal issues changing now, Eli Lilly is now going after compounding pharmacies and private practitioners, saying that you can't use semaglutide and tirzepatide because they own the patent on it. Well, that's true. But the reason why compounding pharmacy was developed was so that the physician can customize a blend, because the patient has other sensitivities and clinical needs that are outside the big box formula. So the only way to really do that in the weight loss and do it consistently with a low barrier is through the InBody. So we use the InBody as a tool to say, okay, their muscle levels are low, they have ECW, they have extracellular fluid, they have inflammation here, their fat ratios are high. We want to be able to track these things so we can not just customize the GLP-1, we can also look at other things like nutrient absorption, creatine. Are they starving themselves? If we see the muscle mass go down and then the fat not changing a whole lot, then we know sometimes they're starving themselves. So it gives us just a tremendous amount of information. And the more experience you're with the InBody, I probably have read over 10,000 InBody studies at this point, and it is unbelievable how much data you can get from a patient without even meeting them, especially if you get that trending report. You get a 3-month trending report on an InBody with a patient, I can probably tell you with 75% accuracy where their chokehold is on making progress.
One of the things that just stood out for me there that I'm curious about, I haven't heard before, was where you were talking about the function of compounded GLP-1s and how it was because of sensitivities. I think part of it might just be because maybe the compounding was less expensive also. Correct me if I'm wrong, but how do sensitivities play into that? And then with everything happening right now with it, where compounding might not be available, how is that going to impact patients that might have sensitivities to it?
Yeah, so I'm on the Peptide Society, and we're working pretty regular, like at a breakneck pace right now to do a couple of things. One is keep an eye on legally what our clinics have to do to be compliant. LegitScripts, as we give our clients, if your clients, in particular the ones who are doing weight loss with an InBody, if they're not LegitScript certified, by all means, we want to speak to them, because you're going to have a very difficult time competing with hims and hers and folks in Circle, these massive conglomerate corporate healthcare, because the LegitScripts allows them to market.
Tell me more about that. What, for somebody that doesn't know what LegitScripts is?
So LegitScripts it's a third-party law firm that will come and vet your providers, your insurance, your labs, make sure that you're compliant, make sure the insurances are in place, making sure you're using a 503A and a 503B, that you're not using research peptides. They audit our website, they audit our doctor's licenses. And we went ahead, when I sold my practice in the end of 2024, but I kept the online portion of it. So I'm doing a lot of telemedicine now, and it's a whole different ballgame. I love it. It's different than the brick and mortar. It's a different model, but it's the same culture that you have to build. But more importantly, to make a telemedicine clinic work, you have to be able to market effectively. Everybody knows hook, story, offer, but your hook and your story and your offer on an ad don't mean anything if Google and Facebook don't put your ad out there. So when we set up ad campaigns with legit scripts, not only do the ads get approved much quicker, they allow you to market medication. They allow you to market medical programs. And if you don't have legit scripts, they either ban your account or they might let like a halfway decent ad go through, but they won't push it out there. So it's probably been maybe one of the biggest advantages that we've built moving forward into the telemedicine space was, and even when we had the brick and mortar, was having the legit script certification, because none of your competitors are going to do it. It's expensive. I mean, it cost me, if I was just doing it as a solo practitioner, it would have been about around $3,000 to $5,000, but we actually registered at a telemedicine clinic, so it was about $25,000. But is it worth it? If you're serious and want to be in this space and scale, not just have a big office, but scale throughout your whole state or the nation, it's really the path to go.
So legit scripts, you get certified, and then is it a plugin that comes onto Facebook or Google for the ads so that they recognize that you are certified in that, or is it how does it actually come into play in that process?
Yeah, so it takes about 6 to 9 months to get fully certified. I know we have shorter paths to do it with some of our programs, but in general, it's about 6 to 9 months. They issues you a widget, an iframe widget that's certified through their server, and then you plug that widget onto your website, and that tells Facebook and Google that your clinic under that URL is legit script certified. And every couple of months they'll reach out and they'll want to, they'll do some kind of an audit. But what they're doing, and it's good and bad, what they are doing is they're flushing out, a lot of these, marketing kids who are selling GLP-1s with no level of medical oversight. So in that sense, I really like it. The challenge, though, is it's a massive financial barrier to put this in place for legitimate practitioners, and that's kind of where we developed this softer, easier pathway for them to be able to do it.
Really feels like with everything happening right now, with lawsuits that are happening, or the challenges people are facing, it's really like a wake-up call for a lot of people to align resources and things like this to be more sustainable and withstand some of the challenges that are coming through.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I see with clinics now, the clinics who get the most when they work with us is the provider who understands that they have to do something different. I think you and I talked about what's the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing but expecting a different result. A lot of guys want to do the same thing but expect a different result. Those days are gone. Like how you practiced definitely 10 years ago, but even as little as 3 years ago, how you practice then has changed. And if you're not keeping up with AI or certifications or being a smaller piece of a bigger pie, you're going to be stuck there. And before you know it, it's like a minnow trap. You've swam in, and before you know it, you're stuck in this trap. And I see it happen with some of the best clinics in the country. 5 years ago, they were the gold standard. They were amazing. They were doing tremendous revenue. They had great reviews. But now the world has shifted underneath of them, and they're caught in an old model and unable to pivot to the new model. And that's kind of where we're stepping in right now. And the reason I'm excited about this is because at the end of the day, I want the practitioner to control the patient care instead of corporate medicine coming in, which they've done in the hospitals and are trying to do online right now, and dictate profit over clinical outcome. And that's ultimately the goal. So what we're trying to do is we're building up this eye care vitality network, which is basically GLP-1 peptide and hormone providers. And we put them in as part of our legit scripts program. It is a limited piece for them, but it allows them to have legit scripts certification for certain types of ads. And then we train them on the protocols that are the highest standards for peptides and hormones and weight loss. And InBody is part of that. If you're not doing an InBody, you're not doing the highest level of care for your client. You can't track a patient's progress in weight loss by just weight alone. You have to know what's the visceral fat, what's the sub-Q fat, what's the muscle ratio, what's the fat ratio. And not just that, but you need to be able to do, when you do a clinical course adjustment, to objectively see what happens to those things quickly and not wait 3 months until they're finished, some 90-day package before you make that clinical decision making.
I think to the trends in body composition over the years, weight and BMI kind of started it off a lot with, insurance companies wanting to know risk, and that became kind of the standard in medicine. And then body fat percentage had its day where people were thinking the body fat percentage is most important, and calipers came out and bod pods, and we're just seeing basically lean mass to fat mass ratios. And now we've taken a step where I think today muscle mass is having its time in the light, where it's being popularized and important, and protein has kind of come along with that. And one of the things that we show, or we've been trying to help people see, is the water balance ratio.
Yes.
So I think the next step to that is going to be the edema scores, the extracellular water, looking at that balance. And I'm curious, how has that come into the work that you've done with your practices?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I wrote the Great American Food Fight, probably the best book I've written. I started it in 2000, I want to say like 12. I didn't finish it until 2000. I'm going to say 15 or 16. And the only reason I wrote the book was because patients wanted to know, can you just give me a list of good foods to eat? And so I started doing like little lists and top 10 and, the dirty dozen type of thing. And then I started getting in the rabbit hole of GMOs and then pesticides and then herbicides. And then really I got into a lot of the tactics that the food industry uses for marketing. And then when I get into that, I get obsessed about certain things. And when I got down that rabbit hole, I said, I actually have to go and find out objectively, where can I show how the consumer for food is being manipulated? How can I show where the pharmaceutical companies are coming in and objectively not trying to solve the problem? And that's what the Great American Food Fight was. Coming back to your question, the muscle to fat ratio has always been a crux that we've used, because that's what this research has always said. In the 80s, they made it so that fat was the enemy, not sugar. Then if you go back to Ansel Keys, when it comes down to policy decision making, he's the one who screwed all that up because you want to get subsidies for the government for grains. So there's a whole political side to how we've gotten where we are. But I found that when I got caught up in that, I got on a soapbox and I would lose the interest of the patient because they didn't want to hear the political side of it. They want to know, just tell me what to do. Like, I get you're fired up about all this stuff and it's not fair. What do I need to do? So we've simplified all that. And then we get back into the muscle fat ratio. Now, the second component that most doctors know about but do a very poor job of tracking is inflammation. So inflammation is whether the water or whether the fluids are moving in and out of the cell. And that's where that extracellular fluid number comes from. So, on a deeper level, basically what happens is that cell becomes toxic or has the inability to detox itself, then it doesn't allow fluid in and out of the cell. It can either trap fluid in the cell or out of the cell. And those little gateway channels have things, let's say, for example, one example would be like microplastics. Well, they mimic estrogen, so they bind to those estrogen receptors. So your body acts as if it's got too much estrogen when it doesn't. And that causes inflammation in different areas. Now, if you want to know why that's significant, it's because every disease that you have, the root cause is inflammation of that cellular structure, and a bunch of cells together make up an organ. And then that's where that disease comes from, is because the cells in that organ are no longer healthy. So the first one for us is the muscle to fat, because for muscle to fat ratio to be in a good ratio, there's 4,000 pathways that the body uses to synthesize protein and break down fat. For it to move, a lot of those pathways need to be working. If it's not moving, then that means that a percentage of those pathways are either damaged or broken. So we have to go in there and we have to open those pathways up. And those pathways are basically like if you're trying to drive from Florida to California, the shortest distance would be, to be a relatively straight line across the country. Well, if that road's closed, then you have to make the long way. And that's basically what happens with these pathways for methylation, for breaking down proteins and burning fats. And that's where we're seeing the problem is. And the root cause of that is that it's inflammation that's keeping that cell from functioning. And then we have to reverse engineer. Is this a dietary habit? Is this a genetic habit? Is there some kind of other systemic organic thing going on that we need to blood work for? But all of that starts for us with the InBody, because we know if we can move that muscle to fat, have our problems already done. If we're not moving it, then that clinically puts us on another path.
Are you talking about metabolic efficiency? I've heard kind of that the extracellular water, total body water score referred to as metabolic efficiency, and kind of what I hear maybe you're alluding to with all these different pathways and the body's ability to bring water or nutrients in and out and detoxify. Would you call that metabolic efficiency in a way?
So in my opinion, everything comes back to, like, the reason why one of our companies is called Metabolic Solutions is because ultimately that's what we're doing. If you're trying to lose weight, feel younger, reverse aging, you're trying to fix your metabolism. That's essentially what it is. Because all your hormones and all these pathways dictate how well your metabolism is. And your metabolism is kind of the litmus test of how efficient your body is about converting fuel to energy and then hormones into, an outcome that you want. better sleep, more energy, faster healing, that type of stuff. The term metabolic is kind of like Smurfy. It can mean a lot of things. But I like that as a general category because when you use the word metabolic health like that, you're basically starting with the big umbrella, and patients can understand that because they've always heard, oh, I have a slow metabolism or a fat metabolism. Okay, well, let's start on the gross scale, and then let's get micro into what the root cause is that means for you.
Yeah. One thing that comes up, I'm curious, this is something I've started to think about lately, where a lot of people will call that extracellular total body water score an edema ratio. Say if I'm at a cardiovascular conference, and then I hear you call it inflammation. And I wonder if those are similar in a way, or how would you also call it edema or inflammation? Because I know there's other markers in the blood that are inflammation, if we're talking maybe like C-reactive proteins or things like that.
So CRP would be a lot more accurate. But if you're just doing like general screenings, CRP takes time. You have to do a blood test, you have to get it read, you have to have it come back. The InBody is a very quick way to see if there's a possibility that inflammation may be a root cause. But I don't use I have heard the cardiologist talk about this and endocrinologist as edema. I don't use the word edema because edema typically is a word that's used for fluid that's built up somewhere. Like you get edema if you have cardiopulmonary problems, you will have edema of fluid build up around your ankles. Or if you have some kind of like cardiac regurgitation, you're going to see fluid build up somewhere else. This is not so much the buildup of fluid. This is why I like to call this like part of just the inflammation process. That ECW, that intracellular fluid outside the cell and inside the cell, what I'm more interested in is the movement of fluids in and out of the cell. Whether it's edema or not is another story. What it is to me is a sign that that cell is not functioning properly. It can't get its own waste out, and it can't get its own signalers in. So somewhere along that process, that communication process is the challenge. At the end of the day, I don't get caught up in what the words are. What are we doing to fix the patient?
Totally. For people that are listening, the ratio that we're talking about takes the amount of extracellular water and divides it into the total water. So a normal range for that would be like 36 to 39%. Typically, in my experience, when I've tested like professional athletes, people with a significant amount of muscle, they end up being closer to that 36%. Down the line, somebody that might have diabetes, a lower amount of muscle, less efficiency in their metabolism, that can end up being closer to 39%. Lymphedema in the low fees, heart failures, things like that in the mid fees. And I'm talking in terms of like a whole body aggregate score with that. But we also take this score and we break it down into each arm and leg and trunk, where we can start to see, if there is an injury or there's swelling in the legs in a diabetic or the trunk. And all these scores, I think, lead us to be able to do exactly what you're saying, to see like how are we going to adjust the care for the patient, or how is the water moving in and out of the cells. And it's really important to, like, we can get a baseline measurement for somebody, but we need trending values, especially with the water, because our metabolism and our water does change so frequently, and a lot of things can change that. If somebody has an injury, a lot of times in functional medicine, people look at the trunk values and the permeability of the gut and maybe inflammation in the trunk. Lots of like alcohol, caffeine, high sodium diets, all those things are cellular dehydrants, so they'll pull water out of the cells, and we might cause more edema or inflammation. Anything else kind of in your zone of influence related to that water and changes, or what might cause those changes, or things that you were doing that were really helping to empower patient results around it?
The extracellular intercellular reading is a good reading. It's an interesting reading for me, but we never diagnose from that, because all that is kind of like a litmus test that there's a problem there. So like I had a patient come in, and I want to say it was over 50. It was one of the highest I had ever seen. And this was kind of a frail soccer mom. And I said, this just doesn't look right. This warrants a little bit further study. So I referred her back to her primary care. He did some other medical history and wound up doing a full blood panel. And some of her CRP markers and some other markers came back, and then sent her out for some more advanced testing. It turns out she had cancer. So I'm not saying the InBody is used to detect cancer, but if you know what the normatives are, and you know what the patterns are, and you see something's out of pattern, it's just a great low barrier, cheap tool to be able to say, okay, this one is really out of range here. Let's make sure we got some medical information intervention that was there. Turns out she did have cancer. She went through, her whatever treatment plan she chose. Then she came back to us, and we got back on track again. Without the InBody, I would have never. She looked healthy. She just looked like she was like losing some muscle, which she was. But there was another reason for it rather than her diet, her discipline, and her exercise. There was a much deeper organic problem there.
Well done. I really love hearing stories like that where we don't call ourselves a diagnostic tool, but when we can see along these reference ranges where somebody is, it can indicate to us to make other decisions in their clinical pathway and lead to outcomes. I've heard a lot of stories over the years with things that happen like that where we see something that's a little off and it leads us to make a new decision to take it a little bit further. A lot of people talk about the relationship between the results, and if you're reading clinical studies, you're seeing like the relationship between CRP and muscle or water or fat, visceral fat, things like that. What other kind of things would you relate the result sheet to, or what other kind of decisions would it lead you to make down the road when you look at the results?
Yeah, so a couple of things with that, and this is really good for any of the clinicians. And one of the things that we train on is this muscle to fat ratio and the visceral fat. I do like the GLP-1s. The tirzepatide is incredibly powerful, but it's not a end-all cure-all. It's just very effective at putting your body into fat burning mode. It makes the food noise go away. And what we do a little bit differently is why somebody's on a GLP-1. We use that window of opportunity to start letting them learn how to anchor habits and disciplines that they need to put into place now while they're on the GLP-1. So when they come off the GLP-1, they've anchored that discipline and that habit in place, so they don't have to go back on it. But one of the things we use the InBody for is that when we start to see that muscle start to drop, 2 to 3 pounds is normal. That's not that big of a deal. When you start dropping into 5 and 6 pounds of muscle, we don't want to wait till the end of that cycle before we make clinical adjustments. So in those cases, we'll either start to microdose or we'll add creatine, or one of the things I really like more than anything else is adding the sermorelin to it. And you add sermorelin to the tirzepatide and you watch the InBody, you'll actually see the visceral fat drop and the muscle start to come up again. Now, they're also on a hormone program, so they're tirzepatide, sermorelin, and testosterone. Then you really got a lot of factors that you want to watch quickly and not wait for the blood work. You want something low barrier, easy for them to do. And, and I think you guys have a home one now. I think I was talking to one of your developers. This is something exciting that we're looking at having come out, is that new home scale you have coming out on our EMR that we specifically have for GLP-1 hormone and peptide providers. We have it so Bluetooth scales can sync into our dashboard. Now, what we're working with InBody on right now is to be able to have that home version, that high-level clinical home version, be able to sync into our dashboard and then have AI pick up what the normative factors are and then tell the clinician and the patient, hey, listen, we have a little bit of a red flag here. Let's make that phone call today. Let's not wait 6 weeks, and AI is actually, AI is coming a long way, but if you put the right parameters for AI, this can be a total game changer for the health and weight loss industry, because now it's not just waiting and waiting and waiting, and it's not about the weight on the number. We've got so many metrics that we can pick up through these new innovations, tell AI what the normative numbers are, and then give alerts to whoever we have to give alerts to, and then recommendations on top of that. So I see healthcare right now, especially in the telemedicine space, going to just a whole different level that we thought were science fiction. I mean, integrating InBody into a dashboard, they've got some wearables now that can measure your heart and brain to see if there's congruency between the frequency and the pattern there. And, you can pick up things on people doing a medical health history and they're wearing one of these suits and you can see the incongruency show up on an objective chart. So you don't have to ask them if they're lying, because most people don't know they're lying. They have a scotoma. They've got this blind spot because they don't want to deal with some of these deeper issues, so they just make it like everything's okay. Some objective data say, hey, listen, we're not seeing an alignment here between what you're saying and what you really believe. Can we kind of get a little bit deeper into that? I mean, this is where we're going. This is exciting stuff.
For providers who want to get involved and they want to learn more, it might be intimidating for them related to that kind of stuff. Obviously, having an InBody is kind of a baseline for that. There's some learning curves for kind of adopting a new technology and understanding how to use it and apply it. But as it relates to where we're going in healthcare, where are some simple, easy places that we can start to do, whether it's like maybe even the type of EMR that we're using, or I don't know, how we're marketing, selling, and then also patient care. Like where are the points where you would plug in simply to get started in a way that wasn't necessarily so overwhelming to take it all in together?
Yeah, so after 25 years and seeing so many changes in the market, I realized that there's no one EMR that is everything that you want it to do. And then the EMR is basically where the patient's clinical profile sits. And then there's a CRM, which is really the marketing side. So the big Achilles tendon for most practices is not getting the interest from a new patient. It's getting the conversion from that new patient to come into your office. And now when they come in the office, how can you efficiently manage that patient with all the choices you have out there? So we've built something called an eye care system, where it's basically we have the marketing side where we put logistics in place so we can do really, ads that are compliant but really compelling for patients to click on. And then when they click onto it, have a lead nurture system that separates you from every other clinic in the country to get that person to come in. And then once they're in, we have a protocol, we want them to do InBody, or we want them to have a home scale that sinks in. And let's start having a conversation objectively, how we're not just going to lose the weight, but we're going to get to that root cause of why you're having a weight problem. Is it a discipline problem? Is it a blood problem? Is it just an ignorant problem because you're thinking mainstream medicine and dietary guidelines are telling you what to eat? Like, it makes it easier to kind of chunk down these categories. And in the EMR that we built now, it's probably taken us, we've been playing this for about 7 years now. The last 2 years, we really kind of customized it and opened up the API. And even now, like I'm working with all of our clinicians right now, is where's the weakness in the EMR right now? And now that we're able to access the API keys, we can really just customize it to solve the problem, to make it efficient. And now we're layering AI on top of that and having AI using models that we all agree on that are based on evidence-based and not like some narrative from a food or pharmaceutical industry to push what's a normative factor. Have AI come in here now. So now when patients come in and have an InBody or they have blood work, the AI will use the models that we want and give us, a framework to work with, and then be able to have a much more like in-depth conversation about what the root cause is with the patient, and then whether it's a diet, is it new peptides, is it hormones, what's the next step that we can do to hit some of these markers that we're seeing on the subjective data.
Another integration partner that we have is a company called Life-Based Solutions, and they have a food tracking app that connects to a dashboard on the back end where the provider can see all the food that their patient has logged meal by meal, day by day, and it scores for the patient in the app. It scores them each meal a 1 to 5 score on how well they've aligned with the macronutrients, and then a color-coded system, blue, yellow, or red, on the quality of the food inside of that solution. So with a quick look, a provider can see all of a week or a month of food for somebody, and then zoom in and look at that actual meal and what they're eating. And the way that they've integrated it with the InBody, both the professional and the home scales, is that it will notify the coach that somebody has done a test and tell them the exact changes that are happening from test to test. And then it will make a recommendation for the macronutrient changes for the person to get to the goal. Because when they first sign up, you use the first InBody test to help make the initial starting macros, and then there's some questions about activity, get to the total daily energy expenditure. But then we can start to actually see the exact foods that are leading to the exact changes in the body composition over time. And I wonder if something like that would fit into your solution, where you can get some objective data on the food and the nutrition. And even when I asked you earlier about the water and the importance of water, the place you went first was nutrition. So I'm curious from your perspective of that, like, how does nutrition fit into what you're doing?
Yeah, and that software you're talking about is excellent. It is so well built. It's so well thought out. It's very intuitive. My challenge with the food logging is that after seeing thousands of patients and doing this for so long, most people don't do it. And the ones that do it, you have a home run, because it means that they're invested in their own health. They're taking accountability. So if you can get somebody to get into the food system, then that's probably maybe one of the best pieces of software out there to use. My challenge on a general level is, some patients I'm working with, and, I'll show you here on one of our case studies, these guys need to lose 150 pounds. Like, if they were tracking food, they wouldn't be needing to lose 150, 250 pounds. So our challenge is to get them to understand nutrition on the most simplest level that they can actually apply, that they can put in their life. I've written 4 books on nutrition. We can get into macro diets, we can get into micro, we can get into Twinkie, we can get into paleo, we can get into Mediterranean, we can get into blue zones. Patients don't give a shit. It's too complicated. It's too contradictory, because there are certain variables. It's not just everybody needs to eat this. There are people who have sensitivities. There are people who have IGF inflammatory markers because of certain foods. So we keep it simple. And really, the 3 simplest things that we do for them is, the first one we always deal with, that knocks out 75% of our problems in the first 4 weeks of a program, is sugar. We get the sugar in line, and we've got frameworks for them to keep the sugar in line. And if they're not keeping them in line, I don't see the needle move inside of our little EMR. I say, hey, listen, make this easy. Take a picture of every meal, drop it in your app. So they don't have to go look at a food log and do it. I'll do it first. And I don't need to do a micro and a macronutrient analysis. I can look at a plate and say, look, you got 45 grams of sugar on that plate. Or the one lady, she kept promising me she's doing phenomenal. She's like, I'm eating, my sugar, I'm doing 25 grams of sugar. I'm killing this, but I'm still gaining like 2 pounds every month. I don't understand what's wrong. So we went through the stress markers. They weren't there. I said, listen, just for the next couple of days, invite me to dinner, turn the app on. There's a little video feature on there. It's a HIPAA compliant little video. Like, just turn your phone on and let me hang out with you guys at dinner. So, sure enough, she puts me on a dinner. Her husband's there, her kids are there. We're all having a good time, laughing while they're eating. And then I look in front of her, and she's got like 32 ounces of cranberry juice is what she has in front of her plate. I'm like, what are you drinking? She's like, what's cranberry juice? It's pure juice. So that's healthy. Well, I'm like, well, let's go find the bottle. So she goes to the fridge and grabs the bottle, and she's drinking 38 grams of sugar per meal. And
Worse
she
than a
has this,
Diet Coke or worse than a Coke.
it's worse than a Coke. Yeah. And it's because it's concentrated syrup. It's high fructose corn syrup. So that was a good example of like someone who really actually had some knowledge. But again, these are scotomas. It's interesting. She had looked at the label of every single thing that she has put in her mouth, except for the cranberry juice. And when, we got a little bit deeper into it, we're like, well, how come you never really looked at this one? She's like, because my deepest fear was you're going to tell me not to drink it. And I love it. It makes me feel good. I know when I drink it, I'm going to have this sensation. Like, cranberry juice was her. We said, listen, let's take 2 weeks off the cranberry juice. I'm not saying we can't ever have it. Let's reestablish the metabolic pathways. Let's get your metabolic healed and functioning better. And sure enough, she went up losing 2 or 3 pounds a month right after that.
Tell me more about scotomas. You've said that a couple times. It's a term that I haven't heard before, and sounds like it might be a medical term, but for somebody that doesn't know what it is, or maybe even a patient that you're talking to about this, is that something you introduce them to, that idea, or is it more about how you speak about the process of that interaction?
It's more when I do coaching. So like I said, I've been with the Tony Robbins coaching program now. Actually, we're almost 15 years now. But one of the things I did learn from them is they talked about people have a scotoma. And medically speaking, a scotoma is an area in your field where you've lost vision. So like if you've got a scotoma in this field over here, you just don't see things here. And we've all got scotomas somewhere in our life where we have a blind spot. Either it's on how we read people or how we manage our money, or things that we just really love but we know are bad for us. So we just kind of put a blind spot to it because we don't want to deal with the issue of that right now. We understand it's bad, but we're just going to move past it as a problem somewhere else. Like, I don't know if you ever saw that meme when that lady has a nail in her head and she's having a conversation with a partner. She's like, I had this headache. And there's just, and he's like, and she's like, people aren't ready to deal with that yet. And as a clinician, it's frustrating, but when you understand human nature, you just understand that it's a scotoma. So we just work through that. And the way that you kind of blow through people's like limitations and their scotomas is that you objectively bring how that scotoma is affecting something in our case, their healthcare, their InBody, their blood work. And so if we say, listen, we need to change this, to change that, let's only try this, because the scariest thing for somebody who wants to go address an area of their life that they're not ready for is to feel like that they have to deal with the whole thing right now, and they don't. They just need to deal on a level to show their brain that by changing this, even for a temporary amount of time, it gets them a better outcome. And that's where new disciplines and habits come in. So yeah, I mean, a scotoma I picked up from those guys is just an easy way to say blind spot somewhere.
Love it. Let's zoom out a little bit and transition here. I want to think from your personal lens about health. How do you define health today, and how has that maybe evolved over time to that definition?
Yeah, so like I know the clinical definition of health is the entire system working in unison, to establish homeostasis regardless of external stimuli and outcomes. I get that's kind of what the general hypothesis of health is. But I think health, the longer you've been in practice, you realize that health is an internal thermometer. Like when we do like financial health for practitioners, one of the things that we find with practitioners is that they're usually very poor with money. And if you take a serious entrepreneur, they're usually good at making money. And what you find is that they have this internal temperature of if they're not making this much, they will do whatever they have to hit that internal temperature. Like in a room at 72 degrees, you might be comfortable, but if you're not comfortable till it's at 65, then you're going to move that thermometer. These people have these internal thermometers for their financials, will very aggressively go after to make sure they're hitting that revenue income to hit that number. People have a lower threshold internally. It won't be about what their financial number is, it's going to be what their emotional paycheck is. And that's what they equate for their health. So they equate for their objective number. But on the health side, if you internally don't feel that you have the power to change your health because of pharmaceutical ads that say, if you have this and this, you take this, or because your doctor has told you have a diagnosis and you only have a 25% chance of survival, once you believe that bullshit, then your internal health thermometer drops. And so where I see health coming in, especially for providers, is that we need to gauge where their health internal power is, like how much power they feel to have over that, and then raise it just a couple degrees, give them super simple steps that they can put in place, raise it a couple degrees and say, hey, listen, remember you didn't think you could go from here to here? Well, you did that, and you did that in 3 weeks. Imagine if we still did this and added this, this, and this, and we typically have 8 principles that they follow. You add another one, where could you be in 3 months? Where could you be in 6 months? Like the whole body, the whole cellular system is completely changed in 7 years. Some of our cells change every 30 days. The quicker you start to see this internal power that you have to control your health and how powerful this body is to heal itself, you put it in the right environment, right mental attitude, move it, good nutrition, sunlight, all that stuff, the more you start to see how much power that has, and you have objective data to show that it is improving, that's powerful. And that's where the health comes in.
Beyond the numbers on the scale, how do you help people define maybe their goals and find more clarity if they are at that lower frequency to be able to slowly make some changes and build momentum?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't know if I have a great answer for that one. I would say after doing this for so long, now in the beginning of practice, I wanted to help everybody. I thought it was my job. And after 25 years, I realized my job is not to help everybody. My job is you're either going to buy into knowing that I'm credible and what I say is going to work, and you're going to buy into that I'm going to have your best interest in mind, or you're not. And even people who have poor discipline and poor habits and a low threshold for how much power they have, if they buy into me, then I can help lift them up, and then I can show them how much power that they've had. For people who just they don't have the capacity to move that needle, then I hate to say this, I just say, you're not ready. You're not ready, because it eats up too much of my bandwidth, my staff's bandwidth, to be more invested in their health than they are. So sometimes just taking it away and let them chase you a little bit is a very powerful move. But sometimes you can't help everybody. And I hate to say that after this long of doing it, you can show a horse to water, but he's got to drink it. And one of the things that we do early on is, listen, if we could really show you, we've done this with thousands of patients, that you can get this outcome, you just got to be all in with me. Like you got to play full out with me here, and we're going to do this. And they feel that from me, because you either love doing this or you don't. Like if it's a job for you, then you're going to be out of this game quickly. But most of us are in this because we love this, and we like moving the needle. We like being part of people's transformation, and most people feel that. But if they're not ready to go in, then they're not ready. Like, don't waste my time, don't waste your money. Let's just start when you're ready. I would say more often than not, they'll come back to us and they'll say, okay, I'm ready now. Because it's not about money. It's not about what they think is best. It's about them buying into that. You got these kind of results for so long, you need to qualify them to be able to do that. And if they're not qualified, then don't waste their money and your time.
That's a challenging thing to do in a business where you've got, you need to make profit and you need to grow your business to be able to differentiate that and tell somebody that you're not ready and not take that business. But the challenge down the road becomes that you have a patient that's not bought in, and you end up becoming fatigued because they're not doing all the things that they should be doing to get the results. And then, maybe you take responsibility for that, and, it just causes all kinds of challenges. So what I hear you saying is the ability to discern somebody's readiness for change is really, really important in that process. And I'm curious, what kind of things do you have built into your system or in your coaching that help identify readiness for change? Because the InBody is one tool that's going to tell us where you're at, but it's not going to tell us your readiness for change.
100%. Yeah.
Maybe in the consultation around body composition, for instance, it makes me think of in the past, when I first started telling people about their InBody results, and I would go and I would just dump everything that I knew about it out all at that one time, and I forgot that there was a human in front of me, and I've made people cry around it, and it makes me feel really bad. But now today, I'll just sit with someone and I'll say, what do you know about body composition? Have you ever done this before? What do you think would make this valuable for you? And sometimes I only make it through a few of those outputs on there, and we've gotten to the point where they've got what they want out of the experience and they got what they were ready for. So I'm curious, related to the InBody and the result sheet, and how you interpret that or share it with people, and then also into the rest of their care. What kind of things are you doing to determine the readiness for change?
Well, you said something that's pretty interesting. It's an important piece when we're coaching somebody. This starts with the clinician. Even if you work in a big center or you own the center yourself, when they're coming to you because they want you to get a change for them. And if you're only making a change for somebody, or you're only recommending things because it makes you more money, then you're going to have a really flat outcome. Even if you get the result, you're not going to emotionally feel that. It's all about connection again. This is why we go back to the training the front desk with connection. But for the clinician side is that you have to have the confidence. Like we want our clinicians, the reason why we went and got Logistics certified is because we want a higher level of authority. We want a higher level of credibility. So we don't take everybody into our network. We want to take people in who this is what they love to do. You understand the protocol. You understand like clinically how to deliver this stuff and how to look for, adverse reactions, who contraindications, and we want them to be great clinicians. But at the end of the day, it's two people. It's you, the clinician, and your client. And you have to have the power to know that if the ultimate goal is for them to get the outcome, is that we don't move past micro agreements. That means slowing down sometimes. That means taking a financial loss sometimes. But what I can tell you is that once you adopt this concept, once a clinician adopts this concept that I'm going to over-deliver with every single patient as long as they qualify for my program, if that person leaves, there's 5 more people behind them waiting. Because this isn't about a fancy marketing campaign. People are starving right now for what we have. Like, there has never been a time, like, I'm thinking about some of the patients right now. I don't even know if I get the story out. She's bankrupt. She lost her family, and she's dying. And she's been with the same doctor for 10 years, and same insurance plan for 10 years. And we did the consult with her, and what she got out of the consult was, you're the first clinician who had asked me what I want out of this. And all the other doctors think I just want to either, get rid of this diabetes and this, get my toes chopped off and getting this cancer resolved. But that's not really what I want. What she wants is the freedom again. She wants not to be dependent on medications. She wants to go have a loving family. She wants to go live a life again. And I think we forget that sometimes. These are real people with real challenges. So when we have these conversations with clinicians, if you can't get to that level of vulnerability with them and they can't open up to you, then there's no point moving forward. You don't have a program that's designed to move the needle. And that's really where I want that clinician's head to get around. Because this isn't about all these tests that we do. This isn't about all the peptides. This isn't about the nutrition side. This is about making that connection first and finding out like that pain point. And can you solve it? If you can't, refer them out. If there's another clinician that's better with that person or that personality type or that condition, get them out. You start building a practice like that, it is just, you can't even stop the momentum that happens with that. So I don't know if that specifically answers your question, but what I want clinicians to get more than anything else is like, there has never been a bigger need for us to step in than now.
Thank you for sharing that story and your emotion as well. I think there's a differentiation here I see within objective medicine and assessments, and people think about the return on the investment from the InBody, and they're like, how am I going to make $1 through the lens of it? And I think about all the training that people go through to learn how to, and maybe in aesthetics, to learn how to do the injections of Botox, or how to do different treatments, or how to know which peptide to give, or all the kind of like objective, hard skills, more tangible things. But what I feel and hear you saying is that the soft skills, the intangible things, the subjective things, and our ability to relate to a patient and enable them a place to feel like they trust you enough to be able to share those things with you. And you've found a way to do that. And I think maybe it comes from your holistic experience, and all the different training you've done, and maybe all the paths that you've went down to learn about these things and how they relate to one another. And I wonder what advice you might give to somebody who's looking to develop that part of them as a person or a practitioner, to be able to show up to a patient in a new way and not think so tangibly about it, and have the sensitivity to be able to determine maybe if I am the right person and maybe I'm not, or maybe if you're ready or you're not. Where can we continue to develop that?
Yeah. So the longer that you see patients, the more you realize something, and this is heartbreaking. This is why I get so emotional about this, is that us as physicians and broader, we failed. We've 100% failed. Like when I wrote the Great American Food Fight back in, 2016, we had estimated that in 2024 that the national healthcare deficit would be $3.6 trillion. And trillion is an insane number. Your head can't even wrap around how much money 1 trillion is. We're at 3.6 trillion in the healthcare deficit. Well, I was wrong. We're over 4 trillion. We're just wasting that much money. And at the same time, we are the most unhealthy that we have ever been. It's estimated that in 2030, more than half of this country is going to be obese and diabetic. So as clinicians, we failed. And the reason why I get emotional about this is because we're the ones that are supposed to be the gatekeepers. We're the ones that are supposed to be in control of giving the right advice and putting people on the right programs. But where we have failed is that we've lost the authority, because now it's gone to big pharma. It's gone to the insurance carrier. It's gone to policymakers that are influenced by lobbyists who have bigger corporate interests. We have lost. So I don't think in my lifetime we're going to win this, but we're sure as fuck going to give it a shot. For clinicians, what they got to do is they got to wake up and realize that we're going to probably lose this battle, but we're not going to lose the war, because the public is right now at a tipping point where I've never seen more people not just starving for this information, but actively seeking for providers to solve the problem. So all that provider has to do now is put the patient first and just become more clinically superior than everybody else around them. And there is no stopping how many people are going to want to come and get treatment and care. because they need it. Like the general healthcare system is failing. Like the average person, one of my roommates in college used to be he used to be a pharmaceutical sales rep. So it was ironic. I was in chiropractic school and he was a pharmaceutical sales rep. And he invited us out to a convention because it was free bar and free food. So we went to this convention where Huey Lewis was singing I Want a New Drug was who the pharmaceutical company had. And I listened to one of the speakers and they did the market research that they found that people over 65 were already on 7 medications. So that market was saturated. It was too difficult to put a new drug in there. But kids under 10 only were taking 2 meds and their studies showed they can get them up to 4. So there's space for 2 more medications. And, guess what? All of a sudden, Ritalin or ADD or hyperactivity became a disease. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a different level of, I don't want to say the word evil because it's capitalism and they get rewarded for being capitalistic. So I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm saying we need to protect ourselves in a capitalistic society that it doesn't destroy us. And that's kind of where we are. So how does that relate to the clinician? That means that, listen, I know you want to make money and there's ways to make a lot of money doing this, but there's how you make your money matters. Now, if you want to feel content, fulfilled, joyous, that you've made a contribution to society, you want to do it with passion and intent, not just how much money you can grab out of people.
Let's talk about the engine behind your impact when you had your own practice. You call it Affinity Med Spa, right?
Yep. So we had 2. We had Affinity Med Spa was the aesthetic arm where my wife managed that and did an amazing job. As a non-provider, she had one of the top clinics in the country, which is very difficult to do even as a provider, let alone not being a provider. And then we had Affinity Regenerative Medicine and Wellness, which was the holistic side, which I did. So if you walked in our practice, she kind of called it his side and her side. On her side, she talked about that they had wants, like you want Botox, you want laser, you want better skin. And then on my side, you had needs. You had to lose weight, you had to reverse a chronic disease.
Were there some lessons you learned along the way that you didn't expect to learn or things that really were transformational for your own growth in business?
Yeah, what's interesting is where I have this level of compassion for patients, the same way I had to put guardrails in place for my patients, meaning that you need to want to get better. When we see objective changes here, I want you to make disciplinary changes in lifestyle habits to see if we can objectively move the measurement over here. As powerful as that was, and as much as I believed in that, and I could enforce that, what I didn't realize is that as a practice grows, and I know you have a lot of clinicians on here, dealing with staff is challenging. And staff after COVID, after people got to spend a couple months at home and realize how much their life was eaten up at work, the culture changed. Like it changed in front of those of us who've been in practice for 25 years, almost didn't even know how to manage a team coming back out of COVID. So it didn't just change on the clinical side, it changed how clinics are run. So one of the things I learned there is that we had to go back and be compassionate to our staff at the same level we're being compassionate to our patients. Our staff, every clinic out there, whether it's in a hospital, ortho center, wellness center, the staff culture has changed because the whole mentality of the country has shifted. So if you want to build your practice back up and that culture back up again, you have to go back in and you need to kind of build the culture under this new paradigm of what's happening in the world and deal with that if you want to over-deliver with patients. That was probably the most side-swiping lesson I had learned just recently in the past 5 years.
Yeah, definitely transformational in terms of people, how they see their care also and their access to care. And I really love how you were talking earlier about how you want to integrate our home scale. Right now we call it a dial H30, and you connect to that device to the InBody app and then run the test, and the data goes into the app, and folks like you can pull that data and be able to show it inside of different profiles, or even with like life-based solutions they've integrated with the home scale as well. We customized theirs to show the intra and extracellular water because it was so important to the nutrition on the back end. But what else? Anything else you feel like you want to share about InBody or your experience with InBody? Or if you were talking to a practitioner who was thinking about getting one or who has one, what kind of advice would you give to them to integrate it into their practice?
Let me share this with you real quick. I share my screen here.
Yeah, it's all you. So anybody's listening online, we're going to put up a slideshow here, describe it in detail, so if somebody's not watching, they can also hear what you're saying.
All right, so this is me at 48 pounds, All-American defensive end, and then a year after this, I was paralyzed. So lots of lessons I learned from here, but one of the biggest things I learned that I like to share when I talk about this slide in particular is just how much power the body has to heal itself. And understanding the level of control and power you have to do that, for me, wound up being life-changing. And somewhat I'm blessed that I was able to have that challenge hit me early in life, because now I see it surface in so many other areas. But I share this because a lot of people say, well, once you got nerve damage, you permanently have nerve damage. Once you have a herniated disc, you always have a herniated disc. And to some extent, that's true. When you clinically measure those things, you will be able to see the damage. But functionally, that's not true. It is so untrue. The amount of functional improvement that you can make is just overwhelming. Now, the slide I have up here, I do recommend you can get the Great American Food Fight. You can get it on Amazon. If you can't afford the $14, I will more than happy send you a free copy of it. But this is a book that I'm just really happy that I went through the arduous process and the self deprecating process of writing a book. But what we did here is we've taken probably over 300 peer-reviewed studies and research on food. And what's the common thread between a lot of those that makes a program work? And really, probably the most enlightening thing about this is how much the consumer in the American grocery system or the food consumer is being manipulated. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but after I wrote this book, there are certainly conspiracies out there that are no longer theory. We can track the money, we can track the policy changes, and it's scary. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to know if you're depending on your health or your financial retirement on the government, you're going to be sadly disappointed. And the longer you're around, the more you're going to realize that. So again, I wrote this to kind of expose it. I don't take any political side on this. I just talk about facts in this. But you really do need to be able to kind of have some X-ray vision when you're making your food choices, and just how much policy and corporations lie to you about what's healthy and what's not healthy. But food pyramid, for example, like the food pyramid is actually completely upside down, which is crazy if you think about it. Like, gave you the exact food pyramid that's the wrong thing to be doing. And where the influence came from that is even more like conspiracy theories. All right, so let me show you this real quick. Now, this one, I really hope that people can see this because this is such a powerful slide. So you can see the one on the left. This is one of our patients. Now, this is an example of somebody who has a very healthy metabolism, who just had some bad habits and some stress. She did this in 12 weeks. I mean, you can see just phenomenal, tightened up, lost a lot of body fat, built some muscle. Like, it's our favorite kind of patient. The results are just outstanding. It doesn't take a whole lot of work to do it. But what we typically see is the one on the right here. Now, what you're looking at, I'll describe. This is Gil. He came in at 360 pounds. The picture on the left is him at 305. He'd already been working with my wife. My wife was his health coach. We wound up doing a 90-day challenge program. So in 90 days, he went from that 305 as part of a group challenge down to 260. And by all measurable means, Gil has hit a clinical outcome. I mean, the guy's lost over 40 pounds, probably close to 80 at this point. You know, he feels better. But when you get to know your patients, you understand like where their limits are and how much more they can push. So it turns out with Gil, if you look at his face, you know, he's still got that thick skin. He still doesn't have the vibrance to him. So we went through a couple exercises with him, got a little more aggressive in calling him out on some of his blind spots. And then we kind of do this one exercise where we said, well, let's paint the picture. If your metabolism was a problem, if time wasn't a problem, if work wasn't a problem, if your self-limiting doubts weren't a problem and money wasn't a problem, paint the picture of what you would look like. And Gil's like, you know what I would look like? I would be one of those guys that when you walked in the room, it grabbed people's attention. I had within like a dark beard, I'd wear like a black t-shirt. You can see my muscles through the shirt. And we're like, what's keeping me getting there? We go through some process. He ends the program. He leaves. And then he sends us this picture 14 months later, a little over a year later. Gil sends us this picture.
Hey.
The picture is literally what the guy told us he wanted to look like. He's got the sharp jaw. He's got muscles through his shirt. Can you see the life in his eyes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you see the difference? Oh, let's go. I don't know if I can go back when I'm not good at these things. Okay, let's go back here. So let's take a look at this picture. So he's already lost 40 or 50 pounds at this point, and he's lost weight here. But does he look joyous? No. Does he look confident? No. Does he look like he's accomplished something enormous? No. If we stop the program right here, and now he did InBody, we had him doing it in InBody once a week, so we could see the reason why he gained so much muscle is he was able to see when he was starving himself and losing the muscle. If we had stopped him here, and this picture is where it's at 260 from 305, if we had stopped the program here because he hit the 40 pounds he wanted to lose, what is the likelihood that he would have bounced back and gained the weight back?
Very likely.
I mean, studies tell us that, you know, it's probably over 85%. Now that we just hit clinical outcome, but we've healed the metabolism. We've anchored in new habits. We've shown him that he's got the power to do this on his own to change. Now look at this picture. What are the chances of him falling back to that old guy?
Very little.
Very little. So like this was, I want to say this is probably almost 7 or 8 years ago. Gil still looks like this. We look Gil up on, now he's lost some of his hair and his beard doesn't look as full, but he's still lean and he's still killing it. So this is the emotional paycheck that we talk about. This is the self-empowerment that we talk about. This is more than just losing weight. This is about changing somebody's life, making them healthy and vibrant again, because it's not how long we live, it's the quality of life in those years. So he's going to live a long time, and he's going to have a super high quality of life. So that's one of the things that I always come back to when we're training doctors and the staff, that the only way you get results like this is if you push and you prod and you're doing this more than just losing weight on a scale. Does that make sense to you?
Well done. Congratulations.
Now, when we do all the programs, one of our biggest things here is three things. Is that we want clinical outcome, which is why we use the InBody. Easiest, quickest, most accurate way to be able to track that. And then two, we want compliance. Like right now, with as much litigation is coming out for peptides and GLP-1s, for you to make a change and not be a FDA copy of a trademark, you need to have clinical decision-making, objective results to be able to make that change. And the InBody is the easiest and probably one of the most powerful ways to do this, because we want to make sure that we're not losing too much muscle in ratio to that fat. We're big fans of this, and if you have a weight loss center or an anti-aging center and you don't have an InBody, to me it's almost like trying to do hormones without blood work. You're using the wrong metric if you're only using weight. This is probably maybe the best plug for you guys is on the front end and throughout progress tracking. If you don't have an InBody, I think you're leaving a lot on the table.
And
Now,
even I've heard others talk that it might even be considered malpractice if you're manipulating people's body composition so effectively with weight loss medications or hormone replacements and not measuring the changes in body composition.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think malpractice is a pretty heavy word, but yeah, I definitely don't think you're giving a high standard of care by leaving it out. And then this is to my second point here. What's on the screen now is how to bulletproof your documentation. And what we built out in our new EMR, which is really more for weight loss and longevity centers, is putting a macro note in there that when that InBody result comes in, it'll trigger that clinical decision-making progress on what that result is. Now, what we're toying with now is having AI be able to read from our LLMs and our source data on how to actually give really good recommendations that are based on what our recommendations are from that InBody result, and automatically giving that to the patient and charting it, which is going to save a ton of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things, malpractice is a big word, but also what's the long-term implication of somebody being on a GLP-1, for instance, not eating enough food, losing lean mass? I guess if we extrapolate that out, what's the long-term impact that could have if somebody's just, selling those as like candy, for instance, and they're not really interested in the overall care of the patient? Is that going to impact their metabolism, their organ
100%.
function? Like what kind of things could potentially go wrong that we can anticipate or avoid with that?
Yeah, and the truth is, to your point, is that if you're just doing that to lose the muscle, lose the weight, but you're not addressing the muscle, then what you're creating right now is a dependency on a medication without actually getting to the root cause habits and lifestyle changes. One of the things I like about the InBody is that we can have them implement a lifestyle change for as little as 3 days, and have a measurable objective result, which is the reward system. So if you know that you've got control and power to change an objective number, then that's powerful. Then if I can change this little number in 3 days, what can I do in a week, a month, 6 months? And that's really what the ultimate tool for the InBody is not just objectively seeing where they are, but using that for behavioral modification as a reward system. So when somebody in our office loses, like let's say 2 points in the visceral fat and gains a pound of muscle, when they come into we have a meeting every morning about who's coming in for the reassessments. You would have thought that they had just won the lottery when they walk in our office. Like, we want them to feel the excitement and the cheerleading team. That's just as much part of their care as it is putting on their nutrition plan or the peptide, is that positive reinforcement, whether you're doing it through telemedicine or doing it in the office. And, with something like the InBody, it's objective. Like, we don't have to guess when it's time to give them, crazy, excitement. But I do want to show you this. I hope they can see this here, Bradley. So this is the system that we built out. So basically, any practice that you have or any business that you have basically is breaking into 4 components. It's the lead generation, how do you attract people in? It's the lead nurture, how do you get engagement from them being attractive to actually coming in and wanting to meet you? And then the fulfillment, like how do you fulfill what the problem that you're trying to solve in? And then I know doctors don't like this word, but sales. And we don't do sales, we sell by education. So the reason why I am very big on doctors understanding that they have to learn some level of sales through education is because that's what the pharmaceutical company is doing. They're just giving you a shitty product at the end of a very highly thought through and very expensive sales process. And they're doing it through radio and TV and internet, and we can never even come close to those budgets. So that means as practitioners, we're back into doing this one-on-one. You know, like doctors don't want to talk money because they feel like that's beneath them. That's not what they're there for. Well, the money, them coming in their pocket and paying for it, is them telling you they have confidence in you that you can solve the problem. You know, the reason why insurance and lobbyists are doing so much what they're doing with the insurance is not that the medication is going to make them healthier, but it's going to solve the problem. If you're depressed, it's going to make you not depressed anymore. If you know you've got this ache, it'll make that pain go away. It's not root cause medicine, and they've done an amazing job marketing that. Now we're starting to see this tipping point where we've been doing it for so long, since the 50s. We're starting to see a tipping point where people realize that it's bullshit, that they've been lied to. Now, there's a place and a time to fix a symptom, but also we want to get to the root cause, and that's kind of, you know, why we want doctors to be able to say, listen, you know, here's our program, here's your homework, here's what you're going to have to do, here's how much it's going to cost, this is the outcome that we expect to get, and here's objectively how we're going to measure that. So we built all that into the system, all the way from putting your phone call and your ads out, but we even added a pharmacy group now. Because what we get pushback from doctors is, I can't compete with, you know, these big corporate guys because their costs are so low because they're buying in such a volume. So what we've done now is we've been looking and interviewing a bunch of different pharmacies and saying, hey, listen, we've got a bunch of doctors that want to be able to compete on this level. So nobody makes any money off of this. We just have a bunch of doctors. Like right now we have hundreds, but we want thousands in our buyers group, so we can press that cost of the goods sold down. Now we can compete on pricing. Now we can compete on offer. So the way I see this whole system being built out here is that we kind of have like a high standard of care. We're able to take the marketing and kind of centralize it into one area, and then it gets, you know, everybody in our network gets referred out either by zip code or state that they're in or location. So, you know, we're not competing for patients next door. It allows us to have individual clinicians own this space online. So as a collective, we can grow together with autonomy with our practitioners, and not just one corporation just siphoning profits and then putting, you know, 25% back in for massive marketing. So that's what the whole system's built out for. This will probably take most of my lifetime for us to actually make a massive dent, but if we don't start it, then it never gets done. So the same thing I tell patients when they're trying to lose weight, they're like, I'm never going to get to that goal. And like, we just one day at a time. That's how we're going to build this.
Yeah. Go back to that for a second.
Yeah.
So I was in a room of 200 providers, and all of them were interested in learning about GLP-1s, and a lot of them were prescribing peptides and hormones. And somebody was giving a talk at the front of the room about sales, and he was talking about KPIs, and he was talking about like marketing and conversions and all the stuff at the front end of your process here. And I could just generally see a kind of a haze over the medical provider's eyes. And he said, how many of you use a CRM? And 2 people out of the couple hundred in the room raised their hands that they were using a CRM. And I don't know too much about all the different EMRs on the marketplace, but I think a major gap in the marketplace today for medical providers is the ability to understand the process of bringing leads in, nurturing them, and like things that CRMs do, and us in sales are really familiar with, are different stages of somebody's process to help segment that in to be able to move them along and streamline that process. And it seems like you also have something like that that's going to fill a major need in the marketplace today.
Yeah. So this is going to lead me into another story here. So my son, when he was 14, told me he didn't want to go to college, and said that he wanted to open a business. And I'm all for that. I didn't want him to waste $100,000 to go to college to party for 4 years and ultimately wind up doing what he's going to do before he went to college. And today you don't have to do that. Like today, there's so many niche things that you can become good at. So, I took him to Russell Brunson's ClickFunnels at 14. Ironically, we sat next to Alex Hormozy and Layla when they won the $75 million in 1 year from gym launch. So we learned a lot from him and from them. My son's getting exposed to this at 14. You know, he's just eating it all up. And then we took him to Grant Cardone for the sales down in Miami when I had that big one in the stadium. You know, then I've taken him to Tony Robbins, and I've done master level coaching. I've spent hundreds of thousands with Tony Robbins group because their communication level is just at a different level. So I started having him learn these skill sets while he still knows developmental stages. So turns out he's pretty good at this. So now he's worked for some big names and even for some stock companies. And it doesn't matter what you're selling or you're doing. If you understand how to grab people's attention and then move them into like a system with, through a CRM to do really good high level sales follow up, then you can move things. Like some of his programs have actually moved the stock market. Some of his programs for one of the big gurus that you see on Facebook, they have $50,000 a month Facebook campaigns, and he would go in and heat map the landing page about where people's eyes were and where they were clicking, and just move things and make a conversion go from this to 20% better. Well, 20% better on a $50,000 ad spend is a massive. I mean, most people are trying to move 4 and 5%, but 20% is a massive movement. So if we can get practices to get their personality out there, to get what makes them different out there into like high level CRMs, then new patients are no longer a problem. Like that's ultimately what we built out here. Like I don't run the marketing agency. What we built up, we're basically the plumbing for a weight loss and a peptide center. So, if you go into a house that doesn't have any plumbing, it's going to back up pretty quick. But if you've got the plumbing and everything is the infrastructure in place, you can scale that pretty quickly. And again, these come down to the doctors or the owners either bringing other people in who are better in these areas than them, or, doing what I did after I sold the practice was learning more about what these what these specific systems are and how they contribute to the growth of my practice. So we've broken this down into 4 major quadrants. The front end is the lead gen and lead nurture. We give them a dashboard. Basically, we don't want to become their agency because I would blow my brains out if I had to become a marketing agency. But if they don't have the mechanics in place, then what they wind up doing is hiring agencies who own all their data. And then they either get stuck because they can't fire them because they own all their data, or they get poor results and they're still paying $2,000, $3,000 a month. So we've erased that and built the framework for them to have and own that data. So if their agency is no longer producing, they just move the agencies out, but they have the plumbing in place. And this has been a game changer for a lot of doctors because they never realized that switching a marketing agency starts kind of the clock over in certain scenarios. Whereas if they have all the patients in there, they have all the leads in there, and they own it and it's theirs and it's never going to change, they just need to just pivot on who's doing the outcome. And then as we move down the chain, like where we have this whole patient experience, this is our EMR, where like all automations for scheduling and payments and back-end resources. Like if you're coming in on a weight loss program, it's automatically going to drip you videos on how to inject at home, how to have your diet, how to motivational stuff. So a lot of doctors don't want to take the time to build all that out. So we've just built it out in there unbranded. So it's just good information that tidal waves it. And then the EMR now, just as of about 3 weeks ago, the doctors can go in there and create their own unique programs to give to the clients. This is ever evolving. And then the pharmacy group, this is where we added it so they can get low cost and compete with the big guys on price. And then My Metabolic Solutions is kind of the brand that we have out there. So we're basically saying we have this network of physicians whose goal is to fix metabolisms. And, if you're interested in that, get a free discovery call and it'll route them to their CRM. So you kind of follow what I'm doing. We're kind of building out the whole infrastructure so a doctor doesn't have to reinvent this. This is what 25 years of getting your ass kicked looks like.
I don't think there's any better time than today for if somebody's present with how technology is evolving to integrate these things all in one place. I imagine practices for decades have just tried to bolt on all kinds of different features and how that, inconsistent, they don't communicate with one another, or you got to figure out how to make them work with one another, or maybe you didn't pick the best one or whatever it is. Today it's all coming together in one place, and that's a heavy lift for somebody, I think, to think about changing something again. But are you also working with people that have their own systems and kind of being able to integrate this, or is this something where you got to come on and bring in your solution?
So we work everything out of my EMR hub because we test it, but you don't have to use ours. I mean, basically, almost every software now has an API key that you can open up, and we can just integrate like whatever part of this they're really comfortable with and they love. We just plug that in, and wherever they have a deficiency, we just plug what like every office needs these 4 categories. Most offices only have 2, and then they outsource another 2, and they're getting poor results because these people, your outsourcers, don't have skin in the game. And if you're not like running your practice like a CEO and actually measuring progress and tracking those KPIs, which most of us don't do, and even doctors that say they're doing it don't really do it that well. They just look at them and they don't really make judgment like business decisions based on those. So we kind of have seamlessly put all this together. Whatever the deficiency is, is what we plug in. And for some doctors who are like, this is just too overwhelming, this is a lot. No shit. Guess what? The reason why I feel like we failed as clinicians is because we're not comfortable either outsourcing or learning something that might be outside of their purview as a physician. And look, the world is different now. Right now, the way we're running our telemedicine, we are turning a massive wheel with 1/10 the amount of people and 1/50th of the overhead. That's what's happening right now. So what I'm seeing is a lot of brick and mortar doctors are just like, well, we'll figure it out. Look, the world has changed under you right now. And if you're not finding ways to cut costs, be more innovative, and over deliver to your patients, then you're going to be frustrated for a long time, if not out of business.
What advice would you share with a provider who's been saying for years they're not a good business person and they don't feel like they're a good business person, when I think you and I know that it's not necessarily about that they're not a good business person. Maybe it's just their presence to learn new things, or maybe their, like you said, their ability to delegate, or what kind of things would you share? How would you work with somebody that is in that place of frustration?
So I like them when they come and say and frustrated, saying that they're not a good business person, or they don't want to get involved in the business side because they just want to be a clinician. I like that because that tells me they recognize the weakness. But the challenging one is when, like, there's three areas. You're either an entrepreneur, or we all have these three facets: a good manager or a good clinician. And most offices who have a good clinician have very poor management, and they don't have any entrepreneur. An entrepreneur means to be profitable. So that means they don't have good systems in place to be profitable, and even poor management, but amazing clinical skills. And this is where we're losing. What we have to do is either train them to be better managers, which my wife does probably 70% of her time, is training the managers to be better managers, so the clinician can just be a better clinician. And then the entrepreneurial side is, if you aren't going to learn it yourself, then partner with somebody who will be it, because it will be worth the either joint venture or the money to quadruple your revenue. And most doctors are never taught this kind of sequence. They think, well, I own a business, so I'm an entrepreneur. I've got employees, so I'm a manager, and I've been to school, so I'm a clinician. You're not. You're predominantly moving into one of these. Where, believe it or not, my mistake was this. I actually thought I was a better entrepreneur. I know I'm not a great manager because it's not my mindset. I have to have a good manager. But I thought I was an entrepreneur because I've been in so many projects. But it turns out I actually like being a technician. I actually like patient care. So what I do is I find ways to pull myself back into this, which leaves a gap in my business running or my management. So knowing that weakness, I've partnered with people who hold me accountable on the entrepreneurial side. Now that I've kind of moved out of the clinic side, I've moved way more to entrepreneurial side because I have to become better there to scale to my next phase. Most doctors feel uncomfortable moving out of the technician clinical side because they feel, for whatever reason, it's either unethical, immoral, or they went to school for this and not this. So what we're doing here is we're building out specifically for these weight loss anti-aging centers. I want to go very deep in the niche, because you can throw software on top of any niche, but when we go deep into a niche where every nuance is handled and it's automated, then the doctor doesn't have to be a great manager or a great entrepreneur. He just needs to be a great clinician, and then we help plug these other two areas in. We handle the licensing. We either do with a full legit script certification, or we do like a partial program with them and put them in the network. We go over compliance issues to make sure that what they're recommending and what they're ordering is compliant for legit scripts and Facebook and Google. Fulfillment, we train the doctors on how to use protocols. And if they go to the protocols, make sure they're efficient on how they're delivering them. We have a national brand, and we work on their branding. A lot of times doctors, we have two different types of docs. Some docs think it's more about the colors and their logo is what branding is. But what branding is to us is the experience that you give your client. Your colors will develop as your personality and your culture gets built out. But how you create the experience for your staff and your clients is really what branding is for us. The marketing, we have outsourcing referrals that we can give clients, or we teach them how to do it themselves. Then we can give them their own dashboard. And kind of, a lot of times I tell doctors too in the beginning, if they haven't done this before, I want you to get your hands dirty. Like, I've got an anesthesiologist right now doing their own lead nurture, calling the leads, just so they can see what a fucking grind that part of the business is. Because they're like, well, I'll just have somebody else do it. Okay, you can do that, but you need to understand what you're asking somebody else to do. Like, if you have not done it or don't fully have a grasp of what it is that you're delegating out, then you have a scotoma. you have a blind spot in that part of your practice because you haven't been in it to understand enough. So we have like I don't say you have to say your name. You can act like a technician. We have cardiologists who are world renowned who are calling the leads. And even if they do it for 1 hour, I don't care, but they have to understand every nuance of the practice. And then we go over down to analytics, which most software is really good at this today. What I see a lot of doctors do, though, or even practice management companies, is that they overanalyze. Look, if you're analyzing, you can analyze everything, and every part of our systems we have analytics for. But realistically, if you're not focused on 3 stats, if there's more than 3 stats, maximum 5, then you're not making decisions based on the clinical data, on the data. You need to pick the data that you want to see change, but focus that to actually make a change, not have like 45 different stats and then say you're managing data. It's just too much. It's too overwhelming. And then this is what Logiscripts looks like. This goes on the website or on the landing page once we get them certified. And the way Logiscripts works is that we take the medical director or the primary physician, we get all their licensing information, and then we submit that to Logiscripts as part of our network, or autonomously as their own practice. And then just depending on what Logiscripts ask for, we send it to them, whatever process it is. Typically, the fees run between $2,500 and $5,000 just to get the Logiscripts for the client in place, but it's well worth it. If you're going to stay in the space and you want to be able to market effectively, then this is well worth it.
Well, it sounds like you're prescribing, or not prescribe, I guess maybe in a business sense you're prescribing, but you sound like a strategic growth partner where you're coming in to really understand where somebody's at in their business, see, in those 4 different channels where you might be able to provide support and help, bring everything to a foundational level, and then also support them with things like legit scripts and reinforcing, ensuring their success so that they can build a scalable business.
Because what's happening right now is this. If you can see the screen, if you can read this, but it basically is the brick and mortar versus the telemedicine. Now, what I like is the hybrid between the two. Right now, I'm doing predominantly telemedicine, but doing consulting inside brick and mortars on how to add on the telemedicine portion. So when we sold my practice, we had the brick and mortar, and then we started building out the online piece to it, like adding on the telemedicine piece, so we could treat the whole state rather than just a 25-mile radius around the practice. And my eyes opened up to not just be like how much of a game changer this is, but how much more cost effective it is. For me to go treat patients throughout my whole state, I would probably have to open up 35 clinics. Each clinic on the build out is going to run you between $250,000 and $300,000. For me to do a telemedicine, I just need a good EMR and a CRM, and I can either go the state or the entire nation and still give the same level of care as long as I've got all my systems in place. So this is what we help doctors with. A couple things for them to really understand is that it is a different model that they're used to. It's going to require a little bit more learning on their part. And this is not a get rich quick scheme. This is moving into what the next generation of healthcare is. And that's going to have a learning curve to it. But I can tell you right now, doctors who aren't doing this kind of training or implementing these systems in 5 years are going to be kicking themselves in the ass. It's like having the opportunity to buy real estate in 2008 when the market crashed, and then 2014 when it popped up, you're like, damn it, I should have bought that house, for half the cost. That's what this is going to look like to them, because this isn't just a matter of turning it on and then you're profitable. This is turning it on. What skill sets do we need to develop? And then watch this ramp up. And what we're doing with offices now is we want to see their telemedicine growth side happen to be able to match, if not exceed their brick and mortar.
Do you have an assessment that you take people through to understand their readiness or their opportunities for growth?
So it's not formal, but it's interesting you say that's a very observant question, because I have it for my patients. What I'm learning now, like with coaching doctors, I have to start treating them more like a patient, because I just assumed this is a false assumption that I made. If you own a clinic, I just assume you will do whatever it takes to make your clinic successful, be the best, be an industry leader, do whatever it takes. And what I'm finding is that that's not the case. I'm finding that doctors just want to be able to throw money at problems and fix them. And if that's what you're going to do, there's a pathway to do that. You're going to burn through some money before you realize at one point you have to take accountability and you have to take ownership. And so we can either do it 2 ways. We can either keep wasting money doing it this way, and I'm here until you realize, let's stop fucking burning money. Let's be more efficient and get the cost down and get your skill set and your knowledge up. So when you do spend this money, you've got the infrastructure in place to get the return on it. But a formal one, no, I'm not there yet. Right now it's case by case.
That's okay. I think these categories or factors that you have here might be a good template to start from. in terms of just better understanding where somebody's at. And then that gives you, in terms of like, maybe like blood work for a patient, where you can look at all the different levels and see, here's where we got to focus, and this is what I would prescribe to you as a patient in terms of the changes that you might see. But tell me more about impact that you have experienced so far with people that you're working with, and maybe where people were and where you've been able to help them get to. Any success stories that you can share?
Yeah. So a couple interesting things that have happened is that we've taken on a client just only 2 months ago. And within 2 months, she has sold both of her practices in 100% telemedicine. So that was very exciting. Now, I don't recommend that for most people. What we're seeing mostly now, like what the classic avatar for us is somebody's been in practice for a little while and has built a nice practice, but is starting to see growth capacity problems. They don't want to spend a couple $100,000 to open up their clinic and then start copying a system that has some challenges already. Like if you got a perfect system, you want to open up another office, by all means, you should do that. But most offices don't have that, especially the longer you've been in practice, because what you did to start your practice 10, 15 years ago is no longer relevant to opening a practice today. So what we're seeing now is like OBGYNs, cardiologists, anesthesiologists, primary care doctors, some alternative healthcare practitioners who have integrated practices with a medical side, is how do we add this on so we can scale and save money? And then also what a lot of people want to hear my story, what they want to do is we sold two of our clinics. We sold our clinics for 7 figures, and at the same time have launched to the telemedicine side. So we're able to sell the brick and mortar, with the systems and everything in place, and then move into the telemedicine side. And for some people, that's very appealing. For other people, they just want to add this on to their brick and mortar so they can scale up, their reach without having to open another practice.
I really love what you're doing there in terms of what you've been able to create and provide. And I think if anybody's interested in learning more about it, you sent over to me an ebook download that I think described eye care in more detail. So we're going to drop that link in the description and the show notes. And tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that ebook is really kind of hitting the front-facing problem that a lot of weight loss and hormone centers or peptide centers are facing, is to be able to effectively market. I will say that I've been impressed with the level of clinical competence a lot of weight loss and hormone centers have had coming in. I've been very impressed with how well trained they are, how they've gone out and spent a lot of money to learn how to do new innovative techniques. Where they're really lacking is understanding how much the market shares on how to market. The reason why a lot of practices are getting killed right now is because you have marketing experts and agencies in corporate healthcare who have mastered the marketing, and they're taking your patients from you and giving a better offer and having a better system for them to come in on. So what I wrote on that ebook was how to ethically, because I still at the end of the day I'm a clinician, I want to be able to ethically market people and not give them some, bait and switch program, but ethically market to them and legally market to them. So I walk them through what LegitScripts is, how to do it on your own, how do you do a modified version of it with us, and then, basically how do you use that and how do you do your offers and how do you structure it so that patient knows when they come in what they're getting, but how do you attract that patient into your office and still show them who you are without feeling salesy or car salesman or sleazy? It's about congruency, it's about compliance, it's about being legal, and it's about kind of doing the framework of what it takes. So we have the 4 areas of lead gen and lead nurture, operations, and sales. We break the framework down on marketing, on what you have to do. Russell Brunson is good at saying hook, story, offer, but what does that mean for a weight loss center? Like, how do you put that into, an ad that will get people that match what you're trying to do? So this is what I mean when I say that we're going very deep into the niche. Instead of just kind of giving you overview fluff that can apply to almost any business, we're giving you deep, knowledge on how to apply this for weight loss, anti-aging, and peptides. And that's in that ebook.
That's amazing. So if you're out there listening, download the ebook. But also, if somebody wanted to connect with you in any other way, where would you want them to go to find you, follow you, kind of jump on the heartbeat of what you got going on?
So I'm on LinkedIn. That seems where a lot of people contact me. Facebook, I really try to keep it to my personal stuff. But you can reach out to me through Facebook, Dr. Baldasare. I'm going to drop in the chat here. Do I have a chat box here?
Just share it with me, and I'll get it in there.
Okay. So I'm going to email you this website right here. So this is what we've been using to show doctors kind of who don't want to jump on a call, who kind of want to learn. This is called the Eye Care Vitality Network. And basically what this is we kind of go through a little presentation here about how what the challenges are and how to solve them. And then we kind of show the opportunity that we have for different partnerships on how to do your marketing, get all your systems put in place. And then if you want to book a call with me, we'll carve out at least 45 minutes to an hour to understand what the problem is. And if you don't have a deficiency, then I really just want to know who you are more than anything else. If we got a deficiency, then we'll solve it. But my goal here is to build out a network to put doctors back in charge of this anti-aging longevity movement. Because if insurance gets a hold of this and we lose the battle on the longevity market, then we have a problem. The longevity anti-aging space is built for clinicians. And if we don't take advantage of the opportunity now on the front end to build this and take market share and get our message out there and why it's important to go directly to the clinician instead of a corporate healthcare giant, then we're going to lose this opportunity here in the next 2 to 3 years. So that's what this is about. It's about building the network, understanding who's in the space, people who are in the space who've got challenges in their systems, plug the holes in their system, get them up and running, get them part of the network, and just grow this as kind of an organic clinician from the ground up.
Well, I hope we've done a good job here at building trust and opening people up to what you've got going on so they feel comfortable to learn more, book a consultation, and chat with you. I think the last question I have for you is kind of a two-part one. More personal for you and who you are. What kind of like habits, one or two, maybe three habits, do you have in your own personal life that you stick to all the time? And then what kind of legacy do you want to leave? What do you want to be remembered for as you move through all that?
That's some good questions, Bradley. Usually all my podcasts are usually about my structural shit. Nobody cares about me. Nobody wants to know. So I will say this. So I've been with my wife for 31 years now, and I would say that right now, if you're struggling at any point and you're married, we start there first. Like the relationship is really the core where all this is going to just build out from. So having the trust, having the faith, because this isn't easy. Look, building out these anti-aging, building out a healthcare center in today's market with what's happening with insurance and in the healthcare industry and the political environment, this is not easy. There is no guaranteed pathway. That means that you need to be flexible. You need to go through some down times. You're going to have some self-doubt. And, looking at what my wife and I have been through, if I didn't have my wife as a partner, we would have never been able to do what we did. And when we get into some clinics and we start to get to know clinics who really bring us in to make changes, we get to know them personally. And a lot of times, if we can make their inner circle, their wife, their consultant or their manager, if we can build that relationship first, that needs to be the strong thing that we build. And that's what I've done. So that's why I've been with the same woman for 31 years and still feel madly in love with her, is that core is strong. So we build that. And then from there, then everything else is easy to stack on top of it. But, what we sometimes see is, why is the doctor so flaky? Why does the doctor have so much uncertainty? It's not that they have inability in their clinic. Somewhere else in their life, typically their closest relationship has some instability. So believe it or not, that's actually one of the core elements that we start with.
I love that. Anything else you want to feel like you want to share?
No, just look, docs, if I have got one message for you, this is our time. There has never been more of a time in human history where the public is demanding that doctors take control again. And doctors have lost control. Insurance companies, lobbyists, healthcare policies, we have lost control. So is this an easy battle? No. Will this probably be one in my lifetime? Probably not. But right now, this is important. So jump in.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining me and us. And I appreciate you and your support and encouragement of our brand and all the emotion you've shown here today and everything you've done to build yourself and, these resources to help providers. So thank you wholeheartedly.